Welcome to everyone. If you're just joining us, as we have attendees arriving, we will be getting started here just about 5 minutes after the hour. So again, welcome to all of you as you're coming in and joining us for this really fabulous program we have for you today. Just a brief welcome again for those of you who have just joined us for this webinar. We'll get started just at 5 minutes after the hour as some of our participants continue to join us. So get settled in, get ready for a great program. And you might even, as you're waiting for the program to get started, for those of you who have joined already, just know that you can put questions in the Q&A at any time. Our speakers will be looking at those after their presentations, doing their best to address them. So keep that in mind. There is so much interesting information that will be presented today. As we have participants coming in, also to let all of you know that we are recording this webinar along with all of our cross-border connecting series. There is so much information I already know that will be coming out in this program, including the PowerPoints. You can find those on our YouTube channel. And if you've missed some of our previous programs, including programs on AI, you might want to access those as well. If you're just joining, we'll get started here in just about a minute officially. It is officially 5 after, so time to officially get this program started. My name is Tara Jackson. I'm president of the Arizona Town Hall, which is a nonprofit organization that's been in existence since 1962 with the mission of educating, engaging, connecting, and empowering not only Arizonans, but people from around the world and certainly our southern border of Mexico. In 2016, we did a statewide town hall on Arizona and Mexico, which was quite a learning experience, not only for me, but many others. One of our big takeaways was that the amount of misinformation, misunderstanding, and lost opportunities because of that in this region, the Arizona-Mexico region. As a result of that, some town hall participants decided to have a town hall in Mexico. And from that, what we thought would be a one-off venture, here we are 9 years later with programs now that go throughout the year on topics relating to Mexico and Arizona. These have been incredible programs, rich in information, rich in accomplishing our goals of addressing misinformation and hoping to create greater opportunities for the entire region. We are very lucky to have the chair of what we used to call our Arizona-Mexico Committee, now our International Relations Committee, because we do programs not only with Mexico, but with Canada and with countries from around the world who send delegations here. To have as our chair, Dr. Linda Elliott-Nelson, who has put together an amazing series of programs for several years, including this year. And we are also very lucky to be sponsored in these programs, putting them on by the Nelson Family Charitable Fund, without which we could not have the resources to bring these very rich, informative programs to all of you and many others. Our official topic for Arizona Town Hall this year is workforce development. And what we've done this year with the cross-border connecting programs is to tie that topic in. We have a fabulous program today. I've already seen some of their PowerPoints, and get ready to learn a lot from these experts. The topic is on logistics and supply chain management. And with no further ado, I want to turn the program over to Dr. Linda Elliott-Nelson, the chair of our International Relations Program. Linda?
Thank you, Tara. Today's program is on logistics and supply chain management. Trade represents an important part of the economies of Arizona and Mexico. Logistics focuses on the movement and storage of items in the supply chain, while supply chain management covers the coordination between partners who have a role in this network, including sourcing, manufacturing, transporting, and selling. These distinguished panel experts today will talk about how international trade affects Arizona and Mexico and the importance of a trained labor force in logistics and supply chain management to ensure an efficient flow of product to customers. I will share each panelist's biography just before they speak. Our first speaker is Dr. Omar Ahumada, Assistant Professor of Practice, Department of Business Administration and Leadership, Northern Arizona University-Yuma. Dr. Ahumada is an Assistant Professor of Practice at the Department of Business Administration and Leadership and leads the emphasis in logistics and supply chain management. He holds a master's and a PhD in industrial engineering from Arizona State University. Before joining NAU, he was a faculty at the Universidad Autónoma de Occidente in Culiacán, Sinaloa, Mexico. He also worked in the public sector as Director of Food and Logistics at the Mexican Department of Agriculture. His expertise is in international logistics, supply chain management, and public policy development, with a focus on the agri-food sector. As a graduate student, he was part of a project funded by ADOT that analyzed the logistical corridor between Guaymas and Tucson and the supply chain of fresh produce in the United States. In the public sector, he coordinated the National Agro-Logistics Project in the Mexican Department of Agriculture. Please welcome Dr. Ahumada. Omar, you are muted. Please unmute yourself.
There we go. Thank you so much, Linda, for that introduction. So one of the first things that I want to talk about is about the importance of trade. And if you can see in this first slide, the U.S. now in 2024 has a bilateral trade of 5 trillion. That means imports and exports. And if you can see in the picture, we had a little dip during the pandemic because many plants were closed, many ports were closed. We had a lot of issues with trade, but now trade has picked up, and we're again we're not only where we left off, but now we have been growing in trade around the world. And one of the biggest trading partners is Mexico. That has been for 2 years in a row the biggest trading partner with the U.S. talking about bilateral trade. Second, Canada. Third, China, and then in fourth and fifth place, many other countries. And you can see that among those big trading partners, Mexico is the one that has been growing the most with around 5%. But there are other countries like Taiwan and Vietnam who have grown a lot faster, but from a smaller base. So there's a lot of trade going on in Mexico, and in that sense, that by the transborder trade is very big among the U.S. and Mexico, in particularly along the border. I mean, we are located in Arizona and California. This region is not the biggest border. The biggest border is or biggest border trade is in Texas with Laredo and some of the other cross borders. Crossing points, but we have still a lot of trade. And this is the trade that we have here at the border between California and Arizona with Mexico. So we see that it's a trade of around $68 billion in the past year. Again, a 5% increase in that border trade. And we see that televisions, vehicles, medical equipment, vegetable fruits, and beer, for example, are some of the biggest components of that trade. And vehicles and parts have been growing more than the rest at 12%, in medical equipment as well at 14%, and also vegetables at 11%, beer also at 16%. So there's a lot of trade, a varied trade, not with a lot of different parts and components, and also aerospace industry. So there are a lot of companies doing manufacturing across the border and coming through these through our crossing points, to our customs border crossing points. And the reason we have that is because there are a lot of similarities when we talk about cross-border trade with domestic trade. If we think about domestic trade, we usually have regular trucking and railroad. Lead times are shorter. We don't have as much documentation or requirements when we compare it with international trade, which we have to do either by air or by sea. We have longer delays. We have custom. We have a lot of requirements. We have sometimes tariffs, and so we have other security issues when we talk about international trade. But if we compare that with cross-border, we have some of the things or some of the benefits of domestic, like using trucking and railroad, which are cheaper, and they have a lot more flexible because you have a lot more cross-border points. That was one of the issues, for example, when we had during the pandemic, we had issues at the Long Beach, but and that restricted some of the trade that we could do with Asia, but not with Mexico. Because we had a lot of crossing points that were not that didn't have any issues when we had the pandemic. So that's a lot of more flexibility, and we can use again trucking and railroad. We have shorter delays, but we also have a lot of the requirements and customs and critical points of entry that we have with international trade. But then if we compare, if we see the logistic, everything that has to go to everything that goes into having a product at your home, we can see that it's labor, parts, manufacturing, transportation, and everything that has to do with logistics. And domestic is a lot cheaper in terms of the logistic part, but not so much in the manufacturing part, right? And contrary, internationally, you have very cheap to manufacture, but a lot of costlier transportation and logistics aspect. And cross-border is something in the middle, right? We have cheaper manufacturing, but also not that expensive logistics. So if we can think about this, there are products who make sense to build internationally if they're high volume, low cost, or maybe domestic if they're very intensive in capital, or if there's intellectual property issues, then domestic is the way to go. But there's also a lot of products that make sense to do cross-border. That's why having all these different opportunities, all these different alternatives for doing trade is great for consumers, is great for Mexican and Mexican and American companies, and is great for cross-border trade and the development of our region. And how can we improve that? Because one of the things that we can do, and definitely we don't want to reduce labor. One of the things that labor costs, because that will hit people on both sides of the border. One of the things that we can do is make trade more efficient, make the logistic part more efficient. And that's why I'm bringing this logistics performance index, which is an index that was developed by the World Bank to compare among different countries. And this is a survey they do around more than 100 countries around the world. And they focus on some inputs like customs, infrastructure, and the quality of the services, and that means the government and the custom, for example. And then we have as their outputs timeliness, which is how fast can we bring stuff and how long they have to wait either at the border or at the port. International achievements, which is how costly it is to move things around, tracking and tracing, right? And they separate these countries. I mean, being 5 the best that you can do, they separate these countries among logistic friendly, consistent performers, and punctual performers, right? And so logistics friendly usually are all those countries that are already developed, and they depend a lot on their trade and their competitiveness in logistics performance. And how do we compare to that? Well, if you can see, we have the Canada and the USA are amongst the logistic friendly countries, having consistently performed well, I mean, between 3.8 and 4. But some countries, like, for example, Singapore, which was a top performer in 2023, they have been improving more so than Canada and the US. Another thing to mention is that China, which started in 2007, not so great, is now narrowing the gap with Canada and the US in North America, for example. And Mexico, that's after an initial improvement, they have lagged behind in the past reports, right? So there's a lot of things that need to be improved, particularly in Mexico, but also Canada and the US, so they can get ahead in improving their logistics performance, so they can have better competitiveness within nationally and cross-border trade. And one of the things that we can look at, if we focus in the US and in Mexico, in the things that this study compares, is that, for example, the US has to improve in customs and has to improve in the cost of international shipments. And in Mexico, we can improve in everything, but customs is one big area that needs to have improvement, and also infrastructure. So, for example, in cross-border, those two things, customs and infrastructure, is one of the things that both countries can invest and improve in order to have a better performance in cross-border trade, and it will be beneficial for both countries. Talking about some of the some supply chains that are really important and have gotten a lot of notoriety recently is the semiconductor supply chain. And this was developed by, this is the National Semiconductor Economic Roadmap. And you can see that there are a lot of things that need to be right. For example, infrastructure, supply chain, workforce, and entrepreneurship. And also there are a lot of activities that are required in these semiconductor industries. For example, research and development, design, materials, equipment, fabrication, packaging, and distribution. And one of the things that many of the investments that have gotten a lot of notoriety here in Arizona is the investment in fabrication, in fabs. But it used to be the case that after those wafers with semiconductors were generated at these fabs, they had to travel to Asia, be cut and put in packages, and then return back to the US or the North American market for making automobiles or medical equipment or space or aerospace materials, et cetera, right? But with the last investment that were announced last month, the packaging will also be performed here in Arizona. So you have a lot more of the, you will have almost a complete supply chain in semiconductor being able to be performed here in the US. And that distribution, or once those semiconductors are ready, then they can cross the border, or they can be utilized here for making those products, those startups, those electrical vehicles, those different AI equipment, all the different things that are required in the new economy. And these are some of the projections of people that are going to be required in the semiconductor industry, but this is not just in Arizona, but across the United States. So a big growth there, a very big area of growth in manufacturing there. And it also requires a lot of supply chain personnel, right? Because we need the supply chain, make everything work. So the semiconductor industry has all the materials, all the equipment that it needs, and have everything done so we can service other industries, because semiconductor industry is not an end in itself. It's a very important it's a very important component to so many other applications along the economy. Another important supply chain that is across the border is the automotive supply chain. And you can see here in the right image, those are the plants that are in the US. I think it was until 2023. And this is done by the Chicago Fed. And you can see all those different plants. We have plants in the central part of Mexico. We have also plants here at the border in Hermosillo, in Tijuana, but we also have plants in California. And these include, by the way, EVs, right? Electronic vehicles. So we have all these different equipments, but if you can see that in the left slide, in the left image, those are the suppliers. Those suppliers are the ones that bring those parts to those manufacturing plants. And this is so important because not only Mexico provides 20% of the cars that are sold in the US, but the US also produces 65% of their own cars. I mean, their plants produce 65% of all the cars produced here in the US, but Mexico provides 43% of the parts that are required in those cars, and Canada provides another 10%. So 53% of the parts that are put into those vehicles manufactured in the US come from those two countries, and 75% of the parts coming put into the vehicles manufactured in Mexico come from North America as well. So you have a very integrated supply chain where parts coming back and forth. I had an experience, for example, when I was a graduate student. We were working with a TRW Automotive at the time. That was the name of that company at the time, and they had a plant in Chihuahua, Mexico, and we were looking at how to improve their logistics performance from inbound materials. And we analyzed all of their different suppliers, and they had suppliers in the East Coast and the Midwest. And they also had a very important component coming from Mesa, Arizona, in a TRW plant that made inflators for airbags. So they made the steering wheels, and they had the airbags in that steering wheel. And those steering wheels were sent to Mexico, to Mexican plants, but also to American plants and to Canadian plants. So you can see that if we had a lot of tariffs on all of those different combinations of parts and automotives, then every North American automotive in the US would increase in price, but also the ones in Mexico and also the ones in Canada. Another important supply chain that we can talk about is food supply chain, because Mexico and Canada and the US also had a lot of trade in terms of food. And we can see that that trade has been increasing a lot. In 2024, we had the US had 206 billions of imports and 174 billions of exports. Mexico being the main importer of grains and other meats, for example, and the US being the biggest importer of fresh produce from Mexico. But in the end, we had a trading balance of 31 billion. And why is that important? Well, just to cite the example of fresh produce, we can see that from the 80s all the way to 2023, almost 60% of the supply of fresh produce, I mean, or fruits in that case, it comes from imports, and also almost 30% of, 40% of fresh vegetables. And you can see that fresh vegetables supply has been declining in the US on a per capita basis. So if we didn't have those imports, then we couldn't even have the amount of availability that we have right now. And even that has been decreasing, right? And that's, again, very important because at the moment, this was a study in 2012, the consumption of fresh produce has not reached the recommended levels. And that was the same in 2018, which is the right graph. Still, those requirements have not been met by the U.S. population, right? So we have a complementary trade. The U.S. sends us grains. Mexico produces meats for its own population, but also exports some of the fine cuts to the U.S. And the U.S. sends other products, byproducts of their their processing plants or their packaging plants, and so there's a lot of bilateral trade and a lot of complementary between both countries, and producers or growers will be worse off if they didn't have that trade. They couldn't sell, or they couldn't get as good as a price for their products if that wasn't not the case. The same with manufacturing plants of cars and also medical equipment, like we said, and also automotive. And so all of these different companies, they're not Mexican, they're American, they're Japanese. There's a lot of commerce, a lot of trade between the two countries, and a lot of companies and a lot of countries are benefited because of that trade. Just as a final slide, these are some of the jobs in demand according to the Arizona Department of Work. So transportation and warehousing are some of the top in Arizona, but also in Yuma County is the top one, but also manufacturing and retail trade are also important in the state of Arizona, and all of those require supply chain and logistic workers, right? People who have those skills and who are ready to take those jobs that are required those skills. And that's why in our university, in Northern Arizona University, we have a business degree that has an emphasis in logistics and supply chain management, but also we have a certificate that we can where we can prepare people who are already working but don't have a bachelor's degree and want to have that expertise in that area. And we are also working on an apprenticeship in logistics and supply chain management that we can train the future operators and the future supervisors in this important industry. And I just want to conclude that this is an important industry for both countries, and is very important for both for the region, because we have, like I said, a lot of supply chains that are really important and depend on that trade and that cooperation between both countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ahumada. That was fascinating information. If any of the people attending wish to ask a question to any of our panelists, there is a button at the bottom of the screen that says Q&A that you would be able to put your question in there. We will also have some time after all three panelists speak for an open question and answer period. Our next distinguished panelist is Dr. Armando Elizondo Noriega. Dr. Elizondo Noriega is a full-time professor at the School of Engineering and Sciences at Tecnológico de Monterrey, Campus Sonora Norte, with 2 doctoral degrees, one in Systems and Engineering Management from Texas Tech University, and another in Engineering Science with a specialization in Industrial Engineering from Tecnológico de Monterrey. Dr. Elizondo has established himself as a leading expert in engineering, innovation, and logistics. His academic journey includes a 1.5-year postdoctoral fellowship at Texas Tech University, where he developed grant proposals for a variety of agencies. Dr. Elizondo has authored over 60 peer-reviewed publications, including conference papers, journal articles, and book chapters. His research focuses on educational innovation, particularly in engineering education, where he seeks to make technical disciplines more accessible and engaging for younger generations. He has successfully secured funding for projects that integrate advanced teaching methodologies and practical applications in engineering education. In addition to his academic contributions, Dr. Elizondo has extensive industrial experience, having collaborated with renowned companies such as BMW on strategic projects. While working in Silicon Valley, he was part of a team that propelled a company to be recognized as one of the most innovative firms by Fast Company in 2022. Currently, he is actively engaged with leading logistics experts in Mexico, focused on training professionals in logistics and developing strategies to boost commercial success between Sonora and Arizona. His work emphasizes regional and cross-border collaboration, leveraging logistics to drive economic growth. As a Level 1 member of Mexico's National System of Researchers, Dr. Elizondo is deeply involved in research and graduate education. His expertise spans technology management, innovation, logistics, systems dynamics, agent-based simulation, statistics, data engineering, and economic development. Dr. Elizondo's interdisciplinary approach and strong connections between academia and industry have earned him recognition as a thought leader in engineering and logistics. His current efforts to enhance commercial logistics and foster regional collaboration underscore his commitment to creating impactful solutions for real-world challenges. Please welcome Dr. Elizondo.
Hi, hello everyone. Thank you so much for attending this panel. Let me share a little bit of the work we're currently doing, and also let me walk you through a little bit of the history of this work. So let me start. Sorry. So we're going to talk a little bit of the need for the research my team and I are doing in next generation work, how to train next generation workforce in international logistics. First, we started with a paper that published in the journal Cogent Business and Management, and in this paper, we perform a pestle analysis of the trucking industry. Our PhD candidate Pamela Torres, she led the paper, because she has a trucking company, and after one of the many insights we obtained from this study was that we need to equip the workforce with tools to stay updated on emerging challenges in international supply chain. Well, it was quite interesting that after several years, trucking industry keeps requesting training, better training, training that shorten the learning curve. So we realized that we need to address these teaching logistic challenges by reducing cost, increase scenario diversity, increase customization needs, increase teaching teamwork, creating a hands-on experience, and also integrating new technology. So how can we build better logistic training tools that prepare students for critical decision-making, to nurture a cohort of professionals poised to propel innovation and sustainability, pioneering pedagogical strategies that foster collaboration and adapt emerging technologies? Well, we performed a state-of-the-art analysis. It's another paper. These are my colleagues. Our student, Esteban Rodriguez, he was an undergraduate student by the time. Now he's a master's student. He and the rest of the team, we perform a systematic literature review on training tools for to logistics and simulators. And we realized that effective simulators, for instance, require multidisciplinary approaches. They require to be dynamics, and we also needed to generate alliances between academia, supply chain experts, license opportunities, internship collaboration. We observe all that in our review. Also, we observed that we need to enhance supply chain resilience with accurate forecasting. We need to leverage big data and AI simulations. And we also will have challenges in educational simulations like computational performance and technical knowledge and data availability. Data availability was identified as a big issue when we tried to train new experts in logistics. So what solution do we have for this problem? This is one of the first solutions. This is the one that has more progress so far. We observe from the literature review that we need to develop a more hands-on learning experience. We need to develop a risk-free environment, real-time decision-making. We need to create interdisciplinary collaboration. We need to create also data analysis and interpretation, problem-solving skills, and enhance management and motivation. All these we obtained from our review of the literature that will be design specs for our initial solution. After that, we requested funding for a Novus initiative in Tecnológico in Monterrey. It's an initiative that provides funding to do research in education. We requested $5,000 approximately to develop a prototype and a handbook for teachers how to use it. And in this prototype, we obtained some, let's say, some spares, some parts, and spare parts from different suppliers. And we assembled those spare parts to create a live simulator where students can experience real life situations like Kobayashi Maru in Star Trek. We wanted them to enjoy the being part of different roles in the supply chain and given a set of card decks and case studies that are combined, they can experience like if they were playing a critical role in a part of the supply chain, domestic and international. And it's gonna work like this. Let me check here. Yeah, right. No, the laser. So what we're going to have, we're going to run different case studies that they will represent a important situation in the supply chain. Then the students will have different positions in the supply chain and they will play that role. They will have a script for that role, and we will have products going through the different checkpoints in the supply chain through the bands that represent the route they are following. And students will have to calculate all the different estimated arrival times. And also during the simulation, when they start playing, the professors, they will get a set of certain situation that will apply to the different roles with a problem, and the professor will pause that particular band and simulating that that there is a problem that needs to be resolved. And the students, they need to come up with a good solutions, else the band will not start working again. And once that the student comes out with a solution for the different position they have, then the band start working again, and they will have to calculate the cost of those errors and also the total cost of the scenario that we're simulating. So this arrangement will work as a multi-purpose arrangement that we can modify for a domestic supply chain. We can also modify it for an international supply chain between two countries, and we are customizing this case study for the trade between Arizona and Sonora, because that is the type of training our local workforce and our students need And that's the kind of experience they need to get before they start working in different positions in the supply chain. We will have another case study for the supply chain between 3 countries, and also it will be it will occur between Sonora and also Arizona. And we have another scenario that will occur between Sonora and other country. So what we're expecting from this type of approach is that we have students or professionals in industry, new hires in companies with introductory basic knowledge of international supply chain, and based on the different experiences they can simulate in these scenarios, and the calculations they have to do, and also the fun they will experience, they will end up developing a lower or an upper intermediate competency level. This prototype was developed by the students on the undergraduate program in mechatronics engineering. These are the professors, and some of the students. They help us to build up the prototype. You can see here the final prototype is finished. We integrated different type of sensors and different types of situations that can be run through the controller that is here. It's a Siemens controller that you can see here. This is how it is connected inside, and this is also how it is calibrated. And this is how students will capture the time for the different bands to work and perform what is requested in the case study that they have to simulate. And also there is a button that professors, they can stop each different station, so we can simulate a bottleneck or something that is happening due to an error in the supply chain. It could be a documentation error, it could be a product error, product handling error, etc. We have a lot of different situations we want to test, and we want the students to learn the solution from the different experts we have. The future work, we comprise a paper that we are publishing based on the experience from the students in the mechatronic program. They develop some different skills like self-directive learning. So we submitted an abstract for an international conference on engineering management. Also, the development team, the prototype development team, we developed a full paper that was submitted to an IEEE conference on development of affordable educational technology for developing countries. These are many of the students here, and these are the name of the authors. They are the main authors of the papers, the students. We guide them, we coach them. We are the 3 professors involved in this publication. And also, we requested funding for this new project that is a virtual reality project where students will learn how to organize merchandise and different products inside the containers, the different containers, and also in the storage houses. So, and they will do it through the different, from the Facebook, Googles, Meta Googles, not Facebook, sorry. And we requested 11,000, almost $12,000 in funding for this prototype. We are the developing team. Mr. Francisco Camus, Mr. Miguel Sandoval, Mr. Bramet, they are experts in supply chain. I am expert in research, and Gabriel is an expert in development on the different Unreal and Unity coding and software development for the simulations that the students will enjoy.
One more minute.
Also, yeah, thank you. And also, we requested funding to use some Nintendo Switch from a previous funded project we had, and we obtained funding to buy the trucking logistics simulation. And we also want to expose students to design routes to deliver the product, and also to cost the different type of hidden costs they have. And also I'm including in this project Dr. Jasmine. She's also an expert in supply chain. And that's pretty much it. So we can say that we want to create a more immersive learning experience. We want to have a more effective teaching effectiveness. We want to include adoption in our different case studies scenario, and also in the sampling of the data. That is a second stage. And we also want to include market demands in the simulation and the different scenarios we simulated. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Elizondo, for that valuable information that you've shared with us. Our third and final distinguished panelist is Buna George, the Executive Director of the Greater Yuma Port Authority, a trailblazing quasi-governmental nonprofit agency driving global trade initiatives in the vibrant Yuma, Arizona region. A proud Arizona State University alum, she earned her undergraduate degree in urban planning and development. Buna is a passionate community leader who contributes to several nonprofit boards, including the Arizona Community Foundation Board of Advisors and the transformative Yuma Multiversity Project under Elevate Southwest. Her dedication to fostering innovation and collaboration earned her recognition by Governor Katie Hobbs with an appointment to the Arizona-Mexico Commission Board in 2023. She is also a proud 2023 Lynn Brown Fellow and named one of Yuma County's distinguished 20 outstanding leaders under 40. She is also an adjunct faculty member at Arizona Western College, where she heads the logistics program. Buna is committed to elevating the region's potential while championing progress and opportunity for all. She feels fortunate to call Yuma County her home and shares the narrative of the beautiful aspects of living on the border. Please welcome Buna George.
Hi there. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining. Again, thank you, Linda, for the introduction. As she said, I am Buna George. I serve as the Executive Director to the Greater Yuma Port Authority, which is a quasi-governmental nonprofit here in Yuma County, made up of Yuma County, the City of San Luis, City of Yuma, as well as the Cocopah Indian Nation. So, and this aspect of the AWC Entrepreneurial College was just an endeavor that we started a little later in 2024. Offering course certificates, procurement, supply chain, U.S.-Mexico focus in regards to logistics, just to give the students an overall exposure of what is really entailed within the narrative. So I want to start off with kind of, we've spoken about, the bilateral U.S.-Mexico, but it's, the U.S.-Mexico-Canada. Everyone's obviously been within the news and is wondering, exactly what this trilateral relationship is going to look like. So one of probably my favorite quotes that I got to pick up was, border divides, but trades really do unite. And here in the San Luis, Arizona, where, where I call home, I'm actually fortunate to call home. Our ports of entry, there's two, right? We have San Luis 1, which is private vehicles, pedestrians, and then we have San Luis 2, which is considered the commercial port. So for the commercial port, we looked at about 15,000 trucks last year that came northbound. But then, if you look at our private vehicles, we're at 3.3 million, and that's in a 12-month period, right? Pedestrians, we're looking at 2.4 million. I want to just stress that the city of San Luis has a population of 40,000 residents. And then you topple on top of it the 3.3 million cars that have to, either go northbound or southbound. We're in a really fortunate position right now. The San Luis 1 port is undergoing a remodel, $311 million and 12 years of advocacy for it to come to pass. So that is ongoing. It's really great for the community. There has been some infrastructure changes that were required on the city's part in order for the port and the traffic mitigation to be a little bit more efficient, right? So a relocation of power lines, sewer lines, water lines, and just the overall kind of movement of that growth. So that's just a little bit here of the San Luis area. And, you know, as you noted here with both doctors who kind of came on previously, I just wanted to kind of incorporate the narrative on what really the kind of the private sector and the public sector are doing with a lot of the research that is coming out of these higher education platforms. So, you know, when we get into trade, tariffs, goods, et cetera, you know, are we talking raw product? Are we talking finished product? You know, it's going to be on how to decipher, right? So I just did a snippet of the industries, right? Automotive manufacturing, what would be considered a raw product, what would be considered a finished product, just so you can kind of get your grasp the concept that, you know, rubber has its own supply chain, cement has its own supply chain, herbs, plants, and bacteria for pharmaceutical and biomedical, also its own supply chain. So you take all this, integrate it, and that's when we encapsulate the word supply chain in regards to the goods that are coming through, right? Mining and metals, ag and food, you know, subject matters that were previously spoke on. So when we refer to the U.S.-Mexico border crossings, I just want to stress that these are the lawful trade and travel points, ladies and gentlemen. So of the 1,954 miles of international borders, you know, most of the trade, whether it's coming in, and we'll talk a little bit about methods of transport right now, these are going to be kind of the key points that we really do want to refer to over. So, you know, trains, planes, and automobiles, right? We look at the method of transport. It basically, that's everything encapsulated when it comes to the logistics aspect. So we go into railways, right? If you recall, when Dr. Ahumada had his map up of the auto supply chain, it's pretty much centrally located on the East Coast. And if you'll see here within the images, that's a large rail infrastructure that is already in place, right? And it really does make sense to move those larger, heavier products through that rail system and through that rail network. So of the 160,000 miles that's currently underway, there's 8 crossings from US to Mexico, with Laredo being the busiest in Texas. And there are 10 higher volume crossings through Canada. And I do want to stress that, you know, I'm going to go in to the importance of infrastructure, et cetera. Infrastructure for rail is an average of $2 million per mile. And that's when we're talking flat rural areas. If we're talking anywhere mountainous or anything that has a grade to it, that price just keeps escalating, right? But if we look at the overall efficiency of what we can move with the rail system versus, you know, a truck or via air freight, we're really gonna know that there's a cost associated with it, correct? So Union Pacific also had this on their site, just so you can know that there's the US system, and then this is a rail system that's incorporated into Mexico. And then the binational rail crossings, where their location on the Mexican side and on the US side, just so you kind of know the points that we're referring to. So when we go into airport transit, right, there's, I want to say it was in 2022, there was over 19,000 airports, 5,100 for general use, over 14,000 for private use. So, and that's extensive aviation infrastructure. And with that comes a different set of regulations, right? So major airports in the US, what exactly is coming in. These are going to be kind of obviously your more bankable logistic points. So when we talk about the overall aspect of, oh, it's just going to go into Arizona. Well, how is it going to get into Arizona? What method is it going to come into? Is it going to come in via air freight? Logistically speaking, where's the endpoint that you need that good to get to? And then you have to be you know, really methodical on your calculations as to how everything's going to come through. And so with the trucking industry, I will have to say, being in the Port Authority for the last few years, I really do have a soft spot in my heart for the trucking industry. It's very, very, very highly regulated. And so within the infrastructure, again, this is interstate, intrastate, whether we're looking at I-10, I-40, I-70, your north and south routes, your east to west kind of coast to coast routes, right? And then you also have mirroring what Mexico has in place as far as their infrastructure and their roadways as well. So as Dr. Excuse me. Elizondo had mentioned that there really is kind of a need, right, for this whole trucking industry in general. We do here in Yuma have 2 truck driving schools, one through Arizona Western College and the other one, you know, through the private sector, located near the Marine base, you know, and one of their kind of marketing measures is to appeal to the vets, right? Because like I said, with trucking and a lot of regulations, you know, sometimes you're on the road for, depending if you're a short haul or a long haul, you're on the road for sometimes a few weeks at a time. You have limited access to fresh fruits and vegetables. You know, there's organizations like, you know, Truckers Against Trafficking, and then the safety regulations, being sedentary for a long time, et cetera. So they kind of want a little bit more of a gritty individual, right, within that aspect. But essentially, that's how most of the goods move, right? So going into it again, like I said, I have a really soft spot, you know, for the trucking industry, knowing that there's like a significant need on both the US and the Mexico side. Maritime is also another aspect on how we receive the goods here into the US. So these are the 10 busiest ports in the US. And so with Dr. Elizondo's example of like the VR of the cargo master, for supply chain optimization, excuse me, that's really going to reduce the cost. How you pack, you know, one of the vessels, that's going to allow more goods to get over here and not necessarily have to make 2 trips or additional trips, et cetera. And so what academia is doing kind of within that crossroad is really making sure that at the end of the day, there is efficient system for the private sector, to be able to benefit the consumer in the end. And so we really do have to be smart, you know, about the transport. So what's the best avenue for your good is all going to depend, you know, when we went back to either a raw product or, you know, a finished product, what it looks like towards the end. Cost is obviously a large factor, but bigger than that, I want to say is probably time to market. You know, if you're dealing with the perishable good, you know, like our food supply chain, are you able to leave that, you know, idling in the middle of a desert? No, you're not. So, you know, ensuring that there's enough fueling stations, ensuring that there's enough infrastructure for you to get to those larger markets so it can be equally distributed, is really important. I guess we can look at the whole like kind of crock pot versus microwave, right? Everyone wants it right now. And so everyone at Amazon Prime's everything. But there's a whole world behind you being able to get something within 2 or 3 days at your home. Another calculated fact within the whole logistics realms is, oh, I'm sorry, that came out wrong, is warehousing, right? So the gods of just in time, I guess you can say, you know, it doesn't really apply nowadays. And not only can we take that from COVID and what that taught us, but really it's an escalation of you know, of your populations, right? People are living longer. There's more people than there were today than there were 20 years ago. So, you know, that they needed to find what exactly a plan B was. So when they say like, oh, why don't they just open a warehouse? Well, what type of warehouse are you looking at? Are you going to do private, public? Is it bonded? Is it a distribution center? Does it have a certain type of automation? Is it a cooperative? Cold storage warehouses, which again, Yuma, Arizona, 350 days of absolute sunshine, sometimes excessive heat, and a lot of perishable products, you know, with us being you know, large on the fresh produce imports and exports, there's ways that we need to be able to better utilize the temperature control here in order to keep the produce fresh, right? And also a warehouse schematic, like what exactly is your product going to come in? And then also with Dr. Elizondo's case study, you know, finding those calculations and what's going to save you, even if it's, you know, half a second or a quarter second, you multiply that sometimes by high volumes, like, you know, 1, 2, 3 million products at a time, you're going to see some type of savings, right? And so what they're really looking for is efficiency. So going back into, you know, the warehousing, sustainability and corporate responsibility. So we expect the private sector to not only bring the goods, bring the warehouse, make sure that they've got carbon emission reductions, green warehousing, community engagements. There's so many needs and wants that are kind of put on to the private sector to where every once in a while we need to take a step back and see exactly we can kind of leverage, right? So challenge and risk management throughout the supply chain. We obviously want to have, we obviously want to create resilience. So that's integrating technology, providing clients with transparent shipment records to ensure the safety of origin and destination, fuel price volatility, right? And, you know, the reason that I put this little coin down here at the bottom, I mean, really look at it, it's currency. You know, we're dealing with not only a whole other nation, but a whole other system of currency. Sometimes it makes sense for them because of the fact that it fluctuates, and then the Canadian currency as well. So again, those are just like the factors that are integrated with everything encapsulating, you know, warehousing, movement, shipment, et cetera. Cybersecurity, also a really big, really big factor. So that's why we kind of go into the aspects of, I'll touch on that right now, of what's all entailed, right, within the supply chain. So we've covered, we've covered the transport, we've covered the needs, the wants, the warehousing. So when we get, you know, the volumes, the numbers that we saw with the first two presenters, you know, what exactly that looks like. So I'll take a pause on that because I know we're trying to incorporate also the workforce development of the presentation. So potential careers, right? Commercial driver, we covered the pilots, you know, with the air freight, locomotive engineer, shipmaster, sea captain, mechanics. I mean, at the end of the day, these are things that go on a daily basis and need to be maintained. Warehouse managers, IT is going to be huge when it comes to the entire supply chain, blockchain aspects. Forklift drivers who, according to some people in the private field, you know, forklift drivers are worth their weight in gold. So, which is amazing, I guess, good forklift drivers, I should put it that way. And then crane operators, when you're talking about loading and offloading those large vessels that come in. Other careers to possibly consider: commercial real estate agent. I mean, look at, just in general, real estate prices between Arizona and California. You're going to be able to pay significantly less for price per square foot here in Arizona than you are in California. And that's not only residential, that's commercial, and that's industrial, right?
One more minute.
Location analyst, fleet managers, your dispatchers, and your programmers. So to touch really quick on the regulations, any regulation that you see on the US is also mirrored on the Mexico side. So when it comes to our fresh produce, we have USDA, FDA, and these are all safeties that come and are implemented there at the border, right? And so the regulators over on the Mexican side, you're looking at ANAM, SAT, and then Sedena, CRE, et cetera. So I know I'm breezing through these really quick but I really do want to cover the final thoughts. To be courteous and considerate, right, to your commercial drivers. So thinking in terms of networks and connectivity, if you really look at any of the networks that I showed, it's just, you have to look at it kind of the human body, right? Many working parts to run efficiently. And these federal policing agencies, they're really put in place to protect the safety and security of their corresponding focus area. And I would really encourage everybody to be a mindful consumer and educate those around you for like real world examples. So, you know, somebody said, oh, you know, I'm not subject, or I'm not going to be affected by aluminum or metal, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I like to counter that point and say, everybody drinks out of aluminum cans. So these are real world examples that you can share within your network. And again, it's just something really important to educate yourself on, that we are interconnected with academia, with government, and with the private sector. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Buna. George, I certainly learned a lot from your presentation. Fascinating information. And now we have some time for our attendees to direct some questions for our panelists. And the first question that came up in our question and answer button area is, what impact could tariffs have on cross-border trade? Again, what impact could tariffs have on cross-border trade? Which one of our panelists would like to address that particular question?
Well,
Dr. Ahumada?
sure. Yeah, sorry about that. Sorry about my camera. You know, I mean, in the short term, one of the things that has already happened is that a lot of importers have been preparing. So if you see January and February data, there's a lot more imports going on than usual, because people are preparing in case there are tariffs. And the second thing is that that's in a short term, right? Things probably can, I mean, it depends. If the tariffs go for a long time, then perhaps some new projects that were thought of for Mexico or Canada will probably come to the US, but that's new investments. But old investments, or things that cannot be done in the US, because you don't have like the climate, for example, in the example of food supply chains, or in the sense of you don't have enough people to work in those areas. Those are not going to come back, and those will increase in price if tariffs, and I'm saying hopefully they won't, but if tariffs are in place, then it will probably increase the price of things. So short term, more trade. Longer term, perhaps changes in where plants are located, but things that are already there, the investments that are already there, is going to be very hard to move.
Thank you very much, Dr. Armando. Would Buna George or would Dr. Elizondo like to give their input on this particular question?
No, I think I'm fine.
Okay. Buna, would you like to direct anything towards this particular question on any impact that tariffs could have on trade?
I will say when they were first implemented, which I think in this last month they had an implementation there at the border for about 3 or 4 days. And how do I say it? There wasn't the infrastructure in place on the federal government side and with the custom brokers to know exactly, was it delineated, what was going to be susceptible to it, what was not going to be susceptible to it. And there wasn't really kind of uniform dialogue, unfortunately. So if you look at, trade a tariff as a tax, right? Ultimately, this is the way I feel. It's going to be absorbed by the consumer. And as long as they keep it like at a palatable number, and it has not a significant increase, but it would be per se an increase. It's the supply and demand. If you're willing to pay more for it, then you're just, as a consumer, are going to end up paying more for the goods. But you have to be the one ultimately that says okay to that.
Yeah, and I do want to add that sometimes, like the example that I showed, is if you put a 10%, I mean, not a big high number. I mean, because everything right now, it was 0% between Mexico and the US and 2.5% with any other country. That was the case so far. But if you put 10%, for example, in the case of Mexico and Canada, with all those products coming back and forth, at the end, it's not going to be 10%, but it's going to increase. I mean, it's going to be a snowball effect, right? Because we have a lot of things coming back and forth, because supply chains were designed with 0% tariffs when they were designed. So you change that, and that's going to have an impact. And another thing that I want to that I didn't show in my presentation is that, you know, supply chains, they need certainty. They don't like uncertainty or variability. So if you have variability, you have uncertainty, costs go up, logistics go up, everything is less efficient.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ahumada. Our next question from our audience is directed towards Dr. Elizondo. Dr. Elizondo, this question is, in your opinion, how will research help intercountry trade?
Thank you for the question. In my opinion, my research right now is in early stages. We have prototypes, we have funding. As soon as we start testing how effective our approaches to teach international logistic approaches to students at the undergraduate level in the international business engineering program and the industrial engineering program, we can see how these measures that we're doing affect learning. We have learning gains, and because we are, as I mentioned, we are trying to simulate real life situations that occur, especially in the different checkpoints through the supply chain. If this research is effective, we can make these results publicly available through different journals and conferences. We can share our know-how of how to teach, and this may help other universities to adopt probably or teaching approaches, and that can help inter-country trade because this will impact a future generation of undergraduate students that will eventually be in the positions to make decisions later on in their careers.
Thank you, Dr. Elizondo. The next question from our audience is directed towards Buna George, and it's a type of a two-part question. The first one is, there are a number of announcements that have been made on a daily basis. So the question is, where do these daily announcements come from that affect the Greater Yuma Port Authority? And how can Yuma look at remaining competitive in trade? Buna?
Thank you. Man, those announcements, usually I get them through X first, right? They're kind of the foresight on it. And it is hard to keep up on them daily. And so I'll give you an example. You know, there's obviously the cost of labor is more inexpensive in foreign countries. And in our case, there's for example, dates that get sent to Mexico to take the pit out because it's a little bit more labor intensive, right? And so the question was, if the tariff is in place, but it's a US product going into Mexico in order for it to get processed, but then eventually it makes its way back into the US market, where does the tariff fall on that? Right? Is it when it's exported, when it's imported? If there's a retaliatory aspect to it, is it going to be tariffed twice, right? Which at the end of the day will make the affordability less and less and less because you're shrinking, you know, essentially your pool of people that are going to be able to buy, you know, X amount of products per pound, right? And in this case, so and those are kind of the black and the gray areas that they're still trying to decipher on right now. I know afterwards the announcement came out when it said, you know, as long as it's under the trilateral USMCA, TEMEC or CUSBA, whatever you want to refer to it as, agreement, then it wouldn't necessarily, you know, have that impact or have that tariff, excuse me, put onto it. So, and as far as remaining competitive, you know, at the end of the day, I want to say that Yuma is just it's logistically beneficial where it's located, right? Within a 45-minute drive, you can go into California, Baja California, hit Sonora, and then be back in Arizona, right? If you do the entire large loop. And so, like I said, with the aspect of Arizona to California real estate, Arizona is, well, it's flat, which I know for, I guess if you're traveling across Southern Arizona, is a very fun to look at, but you know, it's easy to build on. And so we have that going for us. It's just a matter of if you can place your good in a market that's maybe 40 to 45 miles outside of a major like I said, logistics hub, and we're not looking at the just-in-time manufacturing now. They need to have in most industries. I don't care if it's patio furniture or pharmaceuticals, et cetera. There needs to be a surplus, right? Because with exports, that means you've got enough to not only feed your own, take care of your own, but you've got excess in order to serve another country. So again, we're just looking for those industries that are wanting to come in, and you know, maybe they're not necessarily going to do new investments, but they could do some reinvestments on existing infrastructure or existing buildings, excuse me, for them to be able to house, you know, the excess inventory before it goes out to market.
Thank you, Buna. Our next question could be answered by any one of our panelists. And the question is, what benefits does trade direct either towards Arizona or towards Mexico? What benefits does trade direct towards Arizona or towards Mexico?
Well, yeah, thank you for that question. You know, trade helps. Well, like Buna was talking. You know, trade is very good for building relationships and building you know, reducing cost of products. And what in the past years has been happening is that trade has in a way specialized in the sense that some countries have specialized in some type of products, other countries have specialized in some other type of products. In the end, those two countries that have benefited because they had better you know, better goods and better prices for their products, and their consumers have benefited. And also there's a lot of things that I mean, a lot of economic growth on all the countries that have been involved in trade. Unfortunately, I think trade has also had in both countries, and every country has had people who have benefited and people have been left behind. Unfortunately, sometimes the people who are left behind were not part of or have not been some of the measurements or some of the policies in place to reduce that effect. But I think overall, trade has been good for all the countries that have been involved in it, and especially if we consider cross-border region, some of the best performing economic states in Mexico are the border region, and also in the U.S. some of the best performing economic states are the ones that are located at the border.
Thank you. Buna or Dr. Elizondo?
I think, in my opinion, the macro region between Arizona and Sonora can benefit a lot from the trade between our both states, in the sense that we can develop, I would say, new technology that is required to improve the trade. For instance, we can create new supply chains for the electromobility, and we can have joint investments to increase the electromobility corridor between Arizona and Sonora. We can also invest in food security and guarantee food security between both countries and both states. And I think also benefit from the trade between both states is the sense that we can have a joint collaboration in assessing real issues that are important for all societies, like water management, and water-related products. Sometimes we are not aware of, but we have water trade. We have water-intensive products developed in Arizona, for instance, and they are being traded to Mexico and vice versa. So in order to face the water problem that we have in this region, we can also face it through supply chain approach and between both business partners. I think that's my contribution.
Thank you, Dr. Elizondo. Buna, would you like to comment on what benefits trade brings to Arizona?
I mean, I can say with the success of the San Luis Port of Entry and the success in Nogales as well, right? Which they do a significant amount more than San Luis does. They also have a rail line available there, so they're able to get in a different type of product, right? So it contributes. It's worked well. Like anything, you know, anything can use improvement. And I just want to say that as long as we continue to work together and we continue to develop programs like UCP, which is a Unified Cargo Processing, organizations like the Border Liaison Unit through our Department of Transportation continues to open that dialogue. I want to say it's going to be more efficient, kind of business-friendly community that we're going to continue to create here between Arizona and Sonora.
Thank you so much. For our next question, as you know, the focus of Arizona Town Hall this year is on workforce development. So for people who want to follow their careers in either Arizona or Mexico in logistics and supply chain management, what is involved? How much time does it take? And what are the chances that they will find a job once they have done this? Are there different time frames that are involved in studying for this? What can you share about workforce development in this area? Dr. Ahumada?
Thank you. Well, yeah, there are definitely different avenues, right? Because you can work as an operator, right? And I think a lot of it is in the job training or technical training, like drivers and crane operators and stuff like that. And I think that those are very important jobs, very critical jobs, well-paid jobs. There's also management issues, management and supervising, and also those that are taking decisions, and those require a bachelor's degree, maybe even a master's or some degrees to get into those high-paying positions. But there's a lot of different things or different industries that require supply chain management professionals. I mean, healthcare, of course, manufacturing, trade, warehousing, the food industry. I mean, retail. There's a lot of different opportunities, not just in manufacturing. There's a lot of many different opportunities for working in these areas, because almost any company that you can imagine requires supply chain management professionals. So there are a lot of different opportunities, and like I said, in our campus, we have a business degree with an emphasis in logistics and supply chain management that prepares those future professionals in those areas. But we also have a certificate where we train those people who are already on the job, who need that extra expertise to get ahead on their jobs and maybe later on get a bachelor's degree. And we also are preparing an apprenticeship program in collaboration with AC Work, so we can train those operators, those people who require a technical degree, so they can work in the operation part of those supply chains.
Thank you, Dr. Ahumada. We're coming close to the end of our forum. Would Buna George or Dr. Elizondo, would you like to address learning about these professions in 30 seconds?
Yeah, I would say like to summarize what Dr. Omar said, it is pretty accurate, and I would say that working in supply chain is a very beautiful job in the sense that you can learn a lot from different cultures. You can also learn a lot from the operation itself. And this kind of job can help you, as Dr. Ahumada mentioned it, you can get some experience at the beginning for instance, in exporting produce, and later on you can take all that experience and use it to export medical devices. And also you can get all that experience later on and become a trainer of new hirees. So all that kind of expertise that you gain in this type of jobs, they are very rewarding at a professional level, and also in terms of income.
Thank you very much. Buna, would you like to address this in 30 seconds or less?
Yes, of course. So if anything, I would put it back on the private sector. They have to be the ones to speak up and say, this is what we need. I need an individual with this type of capacity that would know if they need to know programming, or even if it's just soft skills, right? Like how to deal with, I always call the management of people like the wild card, right? Because it's not necessarily knowing how to program, but it's being able to teach 4, 5, 6 other people how to do that job. So if you're in the private sector and you know that your workforce is lacking something, like please have a conversation with just anybody here or even with Arizona Town Hall and say, I really wish I had this type of skilled workforce or labor force, so we can, tweak our curriculums in order to involve that.
Thank you very much. And thank you again to our 3 distinguished panelists, Dr. Omar Ahumada with NAU-Yuma, Dr. Armando Elizondo Noriega with Tecnológico de Monterrey, and Buna George with Greater Yuma Port Authority. I now return this program to our President and CEO of Arizona Town Hall, Tara Jackson.
Thank you so much, Linda, for not only bringing us these amazing speakers, but for facilitating it, keeping it on time. And as our participants already noted with some of the requests, this was a very robust and rich presentation. And the PowerPoints and even the recording of this will all be posted on our website, our YouTube channel, so that you can access those for continued use. And I also want to talk about a few of our upcoming programs that are related, especially since there was a question about students. Our next program is actually on, through this committee, is actually on April 2nd in collaboration with ASU's Mexico Relations Department. They will be bringing up students from Mexico, and students from Arizona or the United States are welcome to attend as well. In fact, we would love for them to attend. And Alex, if you could post that link. And community members are welcome to attend if you like as well. The topic will be on workforce and specifically AI and how to prepare for different using AI in these different workforce areas. We also have our background report launch coming up, which is where we launch the background report that gives basic facts and information on workforce. That is coming up on April 23rd. And you can attend that in person or virtually. That will be an amazing resource. I personally think one of the biggest issues that everyone across the world, and certainly in this region, will need to address is the shrinking number of people and what the answers to that is in order to meet all of these goals that we have for a robust economy and community. Another program we have coming up, if you wonder how we select topics or would simply like to learn about the hottest topics that people want us to address, is our annual meeting that is on June 18th. You can also sign up to attend that. Last but not least, as we close, I want to thank again the Nelson Family Charitable Fund for helping us to bring these really informative programs to all of you. And if you enjoy this type of program, and if you find the mission that we do of value, we would love your support. Or as someone who recently facilitated conversations among a lot of nonprofits, simply support your favorite nonprofit. There are many nonprofits who are being challenged right now because of a cut or even perceived cut in funds. And these are nonprofits who do really important work. At Town Hall, we're all about collaborating, about bringing people together, breaking down silos, and enriching our community. So thanks again, Linda, and to our wonderful panel, and for all of you who took the time to attend today. And we look forward to seeing you at a future program.